video, I'm going to continue where I left off in part 1, discussing the interview with Chris Watts in February 2019. In part 1, I talked about how Chris Watts doesn't speak badly about Shanann unless he's pushed a bit to do so, and I explained why I think that is. We can see an example of this inconsistency in these two clips.
Yeah. Did she get fiery like that?
Only once in our entire relationship I've ever seen her that way.
Yeah. And that was a time before, or was that on the night that it happened?
No, it was right back in North Carolina.
Oh.
Here's the second clip where he completely contradicts himself.
Was she fiery? Did she have that Italian blood that her mom has?
Good Lord, yes.
Was she always like that, or was she? Did she snap at things?
She wouldn't snap at me, but you could tell, like, you know, something really irked her a little bit.
Yeah.
It would come out.
0 to 100 type thing, or what?
0 to 200.
Oh, interesting.
She gets acclimated about something. She's like, all right, it's gonna happen.
Chris did play the same role to a degree with both Shanann and Nicole, in that he played the role of the rescuer, which is what I've said that covert narcissists do at the beginning of a relationship. You know, they come across as somebody who is the hero and who's extremely caring to a person who is quite vulnerable at that time. So with Shanann, we can hear what he did for her, just here.
She had got this car from the dealership that she worked at, and she was driving around and felt like, you know, the wheel was about to fall off. And I pulled over where her dad was, and I got underneath it, jacked it up, and I was like, you know, trying to fix everything. He said, like, any other guy she'd ever dated would have just like stood by and watched me do it. And so I think that's when he really like kind of like me.
Took to you.
Yeah, it's just like I was always wanting to help people, not to hurt anybody. Yeah, I was always pursuing her, and then just like finally I grew onto her. Like, you know, I would always like with her medications and stuff. I would always like, she had like 8 bottles of medications, so I would always get like her day and nights and kind of like put them all in that little, you know, flip open
pill box.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And you know, I would always, you know, be around her. I even went to her colonoscopy. And she said after that she knew that was like kind of a keeper. It's like, you know, who goes to a colonoscopy after 3 months with somebody?
Right.
It's a little soon.
Well, she asked if she needed a ride. I'm like, yeah. She's like, you want to go colonoscopy with me? I'm like, sure, why not? Yeah. Like, even sat with her while she drank that nasty stuff all day.
Yeah.
Oh.
And with Nicole, similarly, you can hear how he played that role.
I didn't, like, she even told me, like, she would never, in like a normal relationship, she would never have somebody over at her house, like, more than like once or twice a week, but she felt like she wanted me over there.
Yeah.
She said she felt comfortable over there.
Yeah.
So it's just like, that's what was different. Like, she wanted me over there. She had her moments where I had to talk her like off a ledge kind of deal.
What does that mean?
It's like, I guess after the fact, there was like videos of her that she was like recording herself because she was like bipolar or something. I never do that. But it's like, and she would get worked up about nothing. That's what kind of made her take a step back a few times, and then like I had to kind of like calm her down. She never had anybody that's actually tried to like fix things as far as like, you know, hey, like I like where we're at as far as like the relationship goes, and actually like I did stuff for her around the house, around her little apartment, and like nobody's ever done that, and she just thought I was different. So.
Chris Watts talks about the way his mother reacted to his relationship with Shanann.
Yeah, my parents never, I don't know, my mom was always kind of hesitant.
Why?
I was the baby, I guess. I never, you know, because I never had a girlfriend in high school, so it's kind of like she never like really saw me like.
Oh, interesting. So she's kind of watching her baby walk out a little bit.
Yeah, because when I turned 18, I graduated, I never moved back.
Okay.
At home, so
And
my
how
sister
old-
moved back and forth all the time. So
How old were you when you met Shanann?
I was 25.
What I believe he's saying is that his mother wasn't able to accept Chris as a grown man. He had been her boy, and she had had all of the control before because he was very compliant, and that was how he'd grown up to be with her as his mother. And now, as an adult man, he was going to be compliant with somebody else. and he was going to be influenced by somebody else and not by her, so she had lost control. I go into more detail in other videos about this, but a narcissistic mother is unable to empathise adequately with her child, and so she's not able to support them emotionally, and the reason for this is that she needs them to play a role. She sees them as an extension of herself, and she's not interested in who they actually are. They're there to fulfill her needs. That's how she sees them. When Chris Watts is asked about whether his mother was attentive, he quickly changes the subject and he talks about somebody else behaving in a motherly way towards him.
But did she still try and give you affection, even growing up?
Yeah, she always, my sister was always a parent. Like, it was always like what was going on. She's always open with me. It was always just, closed off.
In families where children are not adequately emotionally supported, it's very common for an older sibling to become more like the mother figure. And a child can't be a mother, and so a child playing the role of a mother is still not going to be enough to support their younger sibling.
And she always wanted to know what was going on, like how I felt, and I just like, no, okay. That's all I give her. Even if something was wrong, like I would have probably never said anything. Because I just deal with it myself. But I don't know if that just growing up that way just kept me that way. Deal with things on your own, but then they build up so much that you can't deal with them, and they take a hold of you never thought in a way could take hold of you.
Do you think it was a result of just bottling up for so long?
Definitely.
I made a video about the makings of a narcissist. So if you're interested, then you could have a look at that. But so with Chris Watts, he has split off from his true self, from an early age, in order to avoid the extreme pain of feeling rejected by just not being accepted for who he is. And that's the same for all narcissists, and that is why they have this false persona, this mask that they have to wear all the time. In one of my other videos, I've talked a bit about how when you have a narcissistic parent, the family operates a bit like a cult with a leader in it. And this would have been quite powerful for Chris. It would have been a big sense of rejection that they didn't go to the wedding, for example.
And
Is
then
there something with invitations or something? Your sister was supposed to send invitations.
yeah, there was. Okay, now you're bringing some memories back.
Did they go to the wedding, your family?
My grandma did.
But your parents and your sister did not go.
Ronnie wasn't there either?
No. Nobody was there. It was my grandma was there, and then the dance when the groom dances with his mom, I danced with Mark's mom and my grandmother.
It's sad, isn't it? I mean, it all comes from a place of love, them loving you and not wanting to get stolen. And
It was a great day. I mean, everybody was really happy. I mean, it's always just rang in the back of my head. They were never there, and every time they look at pictures, it's just like, oh, where's they're not there.
His family was showing him that when he stood out on his own as an adult man and made his own choices in life, they weren't going to support him. They were rejecting him. And this would have reinforced his self-doubt, of what came naturally to him is just not good enough. His inner core self isn't good enough, and he needs to rely on his mask. This message would have been repeated over and over again in his childhood. And so he wouldn't have trusted his core self, and that's the same with all narcissists. They don't rely on their core self because their core self was not emotionally supported. It was rejected because they didn't get the emotional support they needed, or the approval they needed. So he relied on his mask. Because that was what they approved of. With Chris Watts's mother and his sister having contempt for Shanann, that would have felt to Chris like they also had contempt for his decisions. in being with Shanann and in supporting her whenever he did, whenever he did stand up for her to them. All through those years of their relationship, there still would have been that shame that he would have felt around them, because there were so many times when there were little issues between them and Shanann, and so he would have felt that shame that he wasn't living up to their expectations of who he needed to be the whole time he was with Shanann. And so he would have been living with feeling the shame from this contempt that they had. And that would have been affecting him for years, especially because that was already his Achilles heel. Shame is, as I've said, the worst thing for a narcissist. And so having that shame going on all the time would have affected him. And he blames this shame, well, he doesn't say that it's shame, but he blames the situation between his family and Shanann for why he felt so angry with Shanann. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. He did feel shame about that situation, I believe, but he also felt shame for other reasons. He talks about the way that his mother was towards Shanann, and the way he talks about it shows us that he didn't really agree with the way that she treated Shanann, or at least that's what he wants us to see. It sounds like he did think that she was being unreasonable.
So then what was the book at the wedding about?
It was just my mom and pretty much my sister just didn't like her.
Oh.
They just thought, that Shanann had taken me away from them and moved me out to Colorado.
Oh.
Because we were in Colorado when we flew back to get married.
Oh, okay.
Because we went to Colorado for Thanksgiving to visit some friends, and we decided to move out there like a couple months later.
Okay.
So that was like April. I moved out there April 2012. We got married in November 2012 in North Carolina. So they always thought I was just that she took me away out there. She thinks that allergies and like this state of age is like, people think, oh, you'll be
like it's
fine.
made up
like
kind of thing.
He'll be fine. He'll just have a rash. He'll be fine. I've seen CC, like the first time. Well, I've seen a picture of when he had a cashew the first time. That wasn't good. And then she had kiwi the second time, and then the same thing happened. And I know it's real.
Do you know it's serious? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like, it wasn't like her throat like closed up, but she broke out in this full body rash that looked really crazy looking. And luckily, nothing with her throat like happened. But
So did that make you angry at your mom for doing that?
yeah, I mean, I was just like, Mom, I told her you need to think, you need to pay attention. Just because another kid can have something doesn't mean another kid can have something.
So even though he's aware that his mother could be irrational and make things really difficult, he can't take his anger over those years out on his mother, because his mother's response is to reject him. And that's how she's always reacted. When he told his mother that she needed to change her behaviour over the summer regarding the nut incident, we can hear how she responds to that.
It's just like she had to learn that just because one kid can have something and there's another kid that can't have it for a legitimate reason, she couldn't have done it, but that's the kind of talk I had with her. When Shanann called me, I think it was maybe like middle of July or something, when she told me all this had happened. Mm-hmm. That's when I called my mom and talked to them for a while, and then they're just like, they just couldn't deal with her anymore. Everything that happened that day, I guess, I'm not sure everything that was said that day when they had that argument, but apparently it was like a knockdown, drag out, bomb that went off in there.
Pretty hurtful things.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. And, they just don't know if they could ever forgive her or not.
His mother made it clear that she wasn't going to budge. And as he found out, if that meant not going to Cece's birthday party that summer, then that's what it would mean. And so for Chris, when he stood up to his mother, that meant that the whole family were then not really in his life. And with that happening over the summer and his parents both blocking them on Facebook, at the same time he had Shanann saying that she didn't want him to speak to them because she wanted to stand her ground. She didn't want to be manipulated by the narcissistic behaviour that was going on, you know, all of this emotional blackmail with not showing up to Cece's party and blocking them on Facebook, and she was going to stand her ground.
Like, I wanted my parents to be involved, like, since, you know, like the whole wedding thing, and then up to that, it was like, you know, my mom, my sister were always like, you know, combating with Shanann combating with them. My dad was always cool. Like, he's just like me. He's just like, you know, go with the flow. Like, I just want everybody to get along type deal. And I even, like, when I was at the beach, I told Shanann that it was more like what was going on was more like, I feel like, you know, because my dad's my hero, I feel like I've lost, like, something in my life. I haven't been talked to him for 3 weeks. I haven't been to see the kids for 3 weeks, you know, FaceTime or anything. And I wanted them to be able to have that relationship again.
And so there was no way for Chris to be approved of by his family and by Shanann at the same time. He had to choose, and this had been happening for a lot in his relationship, really. I mean, this was sort of one extreme of it, but generally speaking, he couldn't be in really the good books, like the best books, with both at the same time. So as long as Shanann was really approving of him, he had to not do things his mother's way. And that meant that, of course, then his mother didn't approve of him because she was very controlling, in my opinion. So the only way out of this was to put his foot down with one or the other. You know, he had to choose. Was he gonna put his foot down with his mum or with Shanann? A healthy person is okay with not always getting approval from everyone, and if somebody's annoyed with them because they stand their ground, then, you know, that's okay with them. But with Chris Watts, it wasn't okay because he relies on approval and admiration and appreciation for his narcissistic supply. And so when he didn't get that approval from his mother or from Shanann, it built up a lot of resentment in him. And his rage would also have come from a childhood and really a lifetime of having to wear this mask in order to be acceptable to his family and to the world. And so that's an awful lot of rage that's going on inside him. I'm going to play this short clip again because I think it's true, very powerful, and relevant to what I'm talking about now.
But I don't know if that just growing up that way just kept me in that way. Deal with things on your own, but then they build up so much that you can't deal with them, and they take a hold of you never thought in a way could take hold of you.
So you think it was a result of just bottling up for so long?
Definitely.
And he also would have felt jealous of Shanann for being someone he could never be. He didn't have the empathy she had, and very resentful that he could never be himself around her because he could never be somebody that would genuinely relate to her, that she could genuinely relate to. And so it was always an effort, you know, and so that would have built up into a rage towards her. And he had his replacement for Shanann waiting in the wings. He had Nicole, you know, and as a narcissist, he just needed someone to give him that narcissistic supply. And she seemed like quite a good bet because she was the one pursuing him, you know, so that would have felt very secure to him. So if he swapped Shanann for Nicole, then his mother would still be there. And he could be on good terms with his family. They could all approve of him because he wasn't with Shanann. That's how he may have seen it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true because we don't know what his mother would have made of Nicole either. I've talked about how he couldn't have taken his rage out on his mother, you know, the rage from all these years of him having to wear this mask and of his wife being unacceptable to her and the way that she constantly criticised his wife, the way she didn't turn up to things and thereby sort of was criticising his decision to be with her. and had contempt for it. He couldn't show that rage to her because the result would be that he would be rejected by her. And so the path of least resistance was Shanann. It doesn't mean that he logically thought she was to blame for it, because we've already heard that it really doesn't sound like that's the case. But he took it out on whoever was the person it was easiest to take it out on. And and Shanann was the target. Chris Watts says he murdered his family in a rage. And I believe that this is true. I already said in a video that I think that he was feeling rage when he did it. I do want to be clear that I don't mean the kind of anger people talk about when they get off murder and it's called manslaughter because it was just this passionate anger. I think that's how he wants it to come across, but in reality this rage had been boiling in him for a very long time, since he was a child. A narcissist has an awful lot of rage bubbling away inside, and so I do think that this was coldly calculated and premeditated. But nevertheless, when he was murdering Shanann, I think that his rage was now allowed to come to the surface. He could drop the mask on the floor and he could just really get his true feelings out. Again, I don't mean in a passionate, uncontrolled manner. We can see from the autopsy results that he was in control of himself. He hadn't broken any bone in Shanann's neck, and so everything was in control. But he was very used to controlling his rage. It was still there. He was killing her, so he was still expressing his rage, but in a controlled manner. When the detective asks about why he didn't use a voucher in the restaurant, this is what Chris Watts says the first time.
I had already kind of knew that. Using that credit card,
Was that intentional?
Yeah.
I had no other way to do it.
Oh.
I used, because I got these Anarcho gift cards from doing good stuff at work and stuff like that, and I had to use them all.
Oh.
And the detective sounds quite suspicious, and there may be a reason for this. It may be that they know he's lying and that they know he had more vouchers. Or it might be that they're just using their common sense and knowing he could have gone to an ATM, got cash out. He could have found another way around it. And then later on, Chris says things quite differently when he talks about this.
Was part of you just like, screw it, whatever, I don't care, I'm using this card?
Part of me just wants to say, Nikki, can you pay for this? But I don't know.
Yeah.
Even I think from my attorney said she even noticed I used a different card, like a blue card.
Oh.
Maybe she thought, I felt comfortable enough just using a normal bank account or something. But I told her I was going to Iraq, and I told you I was going to Iraq.
Yeah.
It was just it felt like looking back at everything, just reading the scripture more and more now, I can see God gave me opportunities to get out. Even my friend Jeremy Lindstrom, he even invited me because it was his daughter that came and watched the kids on that Saturday night. And he was like, hey, you said we're going to a Rocky game, you want to go to me with the Bronco game and watch the Arizona Cardinals? In my mind it was go. Just say, hey, I can't find a babysitter. Bye.
To Nikki?
Yeah. And maybe that would have been a light switch and my head goes off, light switch and her head goes off, maybe it just goes different directions. That was kind of my last opportunity to kind of get out, it seems like. Cause I wish I would have said, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
And I think that would have just put me on a different trajectory.
When he talks about how he could have got out of it, I don't think it's the relationship with Nicole that he's thinking of. I think it was his plan. I think he had planned to use the card that night, and I think he'd already planned to murder Shanann, and that he could at that point have changed his plan. And I say this because I think if he was talking about his relationship with Nicole, then he wouldn't have talked about that night. He would have talked about the first night he slept with her, you know, that there was still time to get out. You know, if he just hadn't gone round that day, he could have just got out of that whole situation and not been in a relationship with her later. But they'd already had this full-on sort of affair, and you know, he was already planning to take her on holiday. He was looking up holiday places and all this, so you know, looking for jewelry for her. So really, I think when he's saying that he could have got out of it if he hadn't gone out with her that night, I really think that he means he could have got out of his plan to murder Shanann. Notice as well how his impulse is to lie rather than to be honest. He needs to keep getting his narcissistic supply, so he needs to stay in everyone's favour. I'm just going to replay that little bit.
In my mind, it was like, you know, go. Just say, hey, I can't find a babysitter. Bye.
To Nikki.
Yeah.
I think going out with her and using the card was him sealing the deal of what he was going to do, and that's why the following day he made sure that he was going to be going to the oil batteries and that nobody else was going to be there at that time. I think, you know, Saturday night he also heard from Shanann, you know, her worries about what he'd been using the card for as well, so that would have just cemented things for him. She knows, and she's going to have to be destroyed, because not only because of the horrendous shame he would have felt at falling off his pedestal in her eyes, but also because he just didn't want it out there. He didn't want his mask to be destroyed. And, you know, Shanann would have talked to other people. He just didn't want any of this to be out there. If he destroyed Shanann, then he could just continue to be, in his mind, this really nice guy, and nobody would be any the wiser. I think that's the way he saw things. So I think that when he's saying he could have got out of it by not going that night, he's talking about his plan to murder Shanann.
I just felt like, you know, that was what I did on Sunday. You know, it was kind of like, or Saturday night was kind of like the last straw. Kind of like going out with somebody and using an actual bank account card and just like not trying to hide it at all.
By saying he didn't even try, that in my opinion is the honest truth. He didn't try to cover it up. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew she would find out.
You know, me and Shanann, she got home like at 2 o'clock. And, you know, I felt her get into bed. And I just felt like I didn't feel it. I just made sure I looked at my phone at 2 o'clock and made sure she was okay, she was in there. And I could kind of feel her kind of stirring around a little bit. And I just had a feeling that she knew like what was going on.
And when he talks about how when Shanann came home, she got into bed and she was sort of moving around a bit. And the way he describes that is that she knew. Even her movement, just, he took that as she knows. She knows I'm having an affair. And just sort of proof it was too late and that he needed to go through with his plan. And it was also, you know, he was also telling us that he was awake when she got into bed. And Nicole had said that it seemed that when they were on the phone earlier that night, it seemed like he was staying up for until she got home. You know, he was waiting up for her. So this also supports the idea that it was premeditated. Listen to this again carefully.
I just felt like, you know, that was what I did on Sunday. You know, it was kind of like, or Saturday night was kind of like the last straw.
When he says Sunday and then changes it to Saturday night, I wonder if this was really just a mistake, or if it was a slip of the tongue that actually might have meant something. I wonder if he was thinking unconsciously about how on Sunday he'd messaged the people he worked with to arrange to be at the oil batteries on his own on Monday morning. When he talks about it being the last straw, he means to say the last straw for Shanann, but I think the truth is it was the last straw for him, and I'm going to talk about why that is in the next video. I'm also going to be talking about Shanann's murder and what Chris Watts says happened and the inconsistencies in his story. So I'm going to leave it there for today, but if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and if you are a subscriber, please hit the notification bell under the video, and that way you'll get a notification whenever I post a new video. I'm not always, as you've probably realised by now, I'm not always able to post one at the same time each week. So thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.